Hello, my name's Sarah Hendrickx and I'm talking to you in the comfort of your own home from the offices of Axia. This is my second attempt to make a recording for the Post-Diagnostic support group, which should have been taking place on the 15th of July in Crewe, but due to the COVID-19 coronavirus situation, it was deemed impossible for that to take place. The reason it's my second attempt is that I pressed the wrong button on the first attempt and sat there talking to myself for 5 minutes until I realised. Hopefully this is actually recording now. So welcome. I hope you're all well. I thought that this group will be, it'll be quite a short presentation, but just to talk about what's been going on for the last 4 months or so since we've all been in a lockdown situation. I have continued to work all the way through via Skype and at the offices in Axia, which have been very safe. And I have met many autistic people, both adults, children and families. And I thought it might be interesting to share some of the commonalities of positives and negatives that people have expressed around living with this situation. Because I guess if we've all been more isolated than we even normally would be, it can be easier to think that you're the only person going through what you're going through. And maybe it might be interesting to hear what others have said. Obviously, one thing that has been both a positive and a negative is not going to a hairdresser for 4 months. As anyone that will know me will know that I'm not a massively high maintenance person, and going to the hairdressers, like for many autistic people, is a bit of a nightmare, particularly the head massage. So that's been a bit of a bonus, I suppose, but I think it's fair to say I need a haircut. So let me tell you about some of the things that people have been saying to me, and also from my own experience, I suppose. I've been so lucky. I've not really been affected enormously by this, apart from not seeing my family and my children for a number of months. I am fortunate to live in the countryside in North Wales, and so have been hugely grateful for the outside space and the freedom that I've had, and have a huge amount of empathy, get that, for those stuck in a flat, for those stuck in with kids or with a partner that you hate, or no garden. This must have been an absolute nightmare. So really, actually, this has been not a difficult experience for me in any way, shape or form, and I appreciate that that's not the case for everyone. So let me tell you about the general overall impression that I get from most autistic people is actually that most people are happier and less anxious than they've been for a long time. And this goes for children as well. Often the children aren't, obviously they're not at school, and school is the main source of a lot of distress for a lot of autistic children. And I think for some families it's been quite a shock to see the difference in their children positively when that child is not being pushed into that regime of school, which is entirely overwhelming on all levels: people, change, environmental factors. And I think for some families this has been a really useful opportunity, if you can call it that, to actually understand that it really is the environment in all senses that are causing a lot of those stresses to the children. I think also another thing that people have said is that they're having such a great time, maybe because for some people we're a little bit less socially connected. Maybe we don't miss people as much or as many people. Maybe our need for that socialization is much less. And certainly some autistic people have said, well, now that the shoe is on the other foot, so to speak, the rest of the world are feeling really anxious. And for a lot of autistic people, their anxiety levels have really dropped during this virus situation. And certainly those are the people that I've been speaking to. And the reasons for that are, I would suggest, entirely attributable to being autistic. The world is quieter. There is less traffic. There are less people on the roads, on the pavements. there are less visitors, there are fewer demands placed upon you. People are not going to turn up unannounced. People don't want to see you. People are not going to make you leave your house because you're not supposed to. So you get to remain within the sanctuary of your own home, which, as we know, for a lot of autistic people, is really the only place that your anxiety level can be kind of managed. The other things around going out and doing your shopping, for some people, this idea that people cannot stand close to you, they cannot touch you, there seems to be a greater awareness of that personal space around you. It feels to me that when I go to the shops, everything's a bit slower. Everyone's just a little bit more aware. People are waiting more. That the whole process seems to have been really slowed down rather than this rather frenetic rush that it used to be. And that, in a lot of ways, is a much more comfortable experience for autistic people. So it kind of makes sense in a way that for some people, we're not mentally or emotionally struggling in perhaps the same way that some non-autistic people are. Obviously, there are no doubt enormous negatives, particularly if you've had people that you know that have been harmed or affected in any way in terms of health or finances or whatever. The big one, I guess, for a lot of autistic people is the loss of support. So if you're reliant on carers, on family, on other people, it may have been very difficult for you to meet your basic needs and get your food and all of those kinds of things, which is obviously hugely stressful and hugely difficult. Again, a lot of people are worried very much for the health of themselves and for other people. It feels like this is something that's out of our control, which to some degree it is. Obviously, we can take measures to be careful. Some of the children I've spoken to and the families, we've been talking about thinking about not using words like invisible for the virus, the terminology that says it's everywhere, it's invisible. And for some of these children, taking that very literally means that you can't possibly have any control over it because you can't see it and it's everywhere. These are not helpful ways of describing it because it kind of tells you that you have no agency and no means of doing anything about it, which obviously we know that by taking certain measures to some degree that we do. So some of the messages we've received have been a bit distressing. Another thing that's been really problematic, particularly I think for children and maybe for adults too, is this belief and assumption with teachers, with other adults, that you can very easily move from engaging educationally or administratively in an in-person classroom setting, and then suddenly we've all gone to Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. And suddenly those people that you used to physically go somewhere and meet to do something with, they're now in your house, on your telly or on your screen, in the same way that a DVD is, in the same way that someone on YouTube is, and that we are expecting these children and adults to immediately think that's fine. And quite often, from what people have said to me, this is not the case. That quite often these people are massively struggling to engage with anything, because not only are we trying to get them to do the lesson or the interaction, but also got to cope with the fact that they are sitting in their own home and suddenly this person from school, because we know that sometimes compartmentalizing parts of life makes things much easier, is in my house, is in my living room. And so certainly for some people, it's just not been possible for them to engage with that at all. But it's almost, as I said, it's been an assumption that, this is what we do now. Whereas we know that autistic people struggle with those transitions, and yet it doesn't feel like there's been one in order to accept the means by which that communication and learning comes. You're just expected to kind of take it on board. I know that something that's really annoyed me has been other people not following the rules. This should not come as a surprise. I have great irritation in my local supermarket on the one person per trolley rule, where there are clearly couples who have come out of their same car, whom clearly neither of them have any particular need to be accompanying someone else. And in order to overcome the one trolley per person rule, they are taking in 2 trolleys for the 2 of them. one of the trolleys often remains empty and is just taking up double the space in the shop and double the people in the shop. And I am using this for no particular reason other than to get that off my chest, because it has been really, really annoying me for the last 4 months, to the point that I no longer go to the supermarket and I make Keith go instead because it makes me so cross. I'm quite tempted to get a job in my local Aldi just so that I can stand by the door and tell people that they are not following the rules, because what's the point of having rules if you're not going to either follow them or force compliance in some way? I'll stop now. Obviously, for some people, missing your loved ones and your families is really important, and that's been a big deal. I have to say, and this is fairly publicly known, the idea of missing people is not something that I generally emotionally understand or get, and my adult children are autistic too, so I think we don't miss each other, and we've kept in contact with the odd text message and messenger and the odd Skype here and there. But in some respects, I can appreciate that that's very painful for some people, but very much really hasn't been for me and my family. And again, it's about control, and it's about just not knowing when you're going to see people again, not knowing if they're okay, not being able to go to them and help them, which is obviously distressing. I suppose what I've tried to do is to think about, what have I missed in the world? I don't mean in terms of people, but in terms of other stuff. And mainly, I think the only thing I've missed is fish and chips. But the shop's open again now, so I think everything's okay. Also, what didn't I miss? In terms of thinking about, is there any way we can use this awful, tragic, overwhelming situation to learn something and take that forward, to manage our own well-being and broader kind of well-being? Certainly, I think knowing that I can feel so low in anxiety is really positive, because it proves that it's possible, that there are environments and there are settings which are really good for me, and perhaps for some of you as well, and that maybe just noting, how did you feel? If you felt better, what was it that made you feel better? And can you take that forward for the rest of your life? I think, there's a lot of people I've spoken to, autistic people I've spoken to, and some of us are not sure whether we're going to come back out again once this lockdown has finished, because we quite like it in here. But, maybe that will change. Again, one of the things that's raised, again, particularly with children, but also perhaps with some adults, is the transition back. We kind of got used to things being very quiet, kind of got used to doing everything at home and on screens and that kind of thing. And actually, particularly with the kids, to try and get them to go back into an environment that they didn't like in the first place is going to be really, really hard. And it's going to have to be done gently and carefully, and really trying to be aware that that is going to be a problem, and that behaviour and anxiety might rear itself for a little while. Because how would you feel when you've just been given this wonderful treat and all of this lovely time with your family and at home, and all of a sudden they make you go back to the place that caused most of your problems in the first place? I suppose overall this experience is about trying to think about who we are and what we do and how we manage our well-being, which, as anyone who knows me, is very much a kind of big deal for me in terms of understanding and making use of a diagnosis of autism. It's not just about going, well, yeah, okay, that's me, but actually, what can I do with that information in order to inform the choices and the lifestyles and all of those kind of things? So thank you for listening. I hope that you are well, and I hope that you have had more of the positives than the negatives throughout this experience. And it's possible that we will all meet again in the autumn at some point. But until then, keep learning and keep looking after yourselves. Thank you. Bye bye.